Perfect. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session, Small Changes, Big Impact, Creating an Accessible Website for All. So again, thanks for joining us. You're right on time. Everybody is going to be muted today for most of the session, so we can avoid some of that background noise interruption. I know myself, I've got a little 12-week-old puppy that likes to bark right now at the most inappropriate times. And again, we're just in the chat sharing where everyone's joining from today as well. We're also going to be using the Q&A box to send questions. The chat will be open as well, and we are recording the session as a reminder for you to review on our website. So my name is Kerrilee Auger. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships here at Women's Enterprise Center. I'm excited to be with you all today as we learn about the changes we can make to our website to make it more accessible for visitors and traffic that lands there. I join you today from the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan peoples, and I invite you to share again in the chat whose traditional territories you are joining us from. And these WECafes are designed to provide resources, information, experts on topics that are beneficial to you as you start, grow, build your business. So if there's any topic that you'd like us to consider or a speaker for a future event, please be sure to complete the follow-up survey and share those ideas with us as well. We're here to support you on that entrepreneurial journey as best as we can. So again, quickly, I know we're all getting pretty used to Zoom these days, but just to reiterate, we do have the closed caption feature available, and we're going to be using the chat as well. So briefly, for those of you that might be joining us for the first time, just the services that we provide to help you realize your business potential. We're a nonprofit organization devoted to helping you start, lead, and grow your business. We provide business loans of up to $150,000. We have client service and business advisor teams that can support you and direct you to resources as well. Skills training such as this session and some of our webinar series. We have mentoring programs available, wealth of resources available on our website, and the supportive community to help you realize your business potential. So we want to support you on that journey to success, whatever that might look like for you. And we're funded by the federal government through PacificCan now, formerly Western Economic Diversification. They've split that up. So PacificCan is for British Columbia, and PrairiesCan is for Alberta, pardon me, Manitoba and Saskatchewan. We all still remain part of the Women's Enterprise Initiative, which includes these other organizations overseen by WECafe, which looks after the whole country. So any information on this or our sister organizations, you can find more on our website at wec.ca. And we do still have our COVID-19 support page up. It's a great resource for you to find out about government programs. Some are ongoing, some are going to be wrapping up soon. If you have any questions about that, if you're looking for training or resources, we've done a lot of programming like this all around your website. So SEO, copywriting, supporting tools on that as we go to a more digital world. So I encourage you to bookmark that page and keep checking that on a regular basis. There's links to more information again on those government programs, support services that we and other organizations provide as well. So it's a great tool for you to ease some of the Google search pains, if you will. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Kale Gosen for Small Changes, Big Impact. Kale is a settler living in Vancouver on the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh territory. She is a white, queer, disabled activist who's passionate about building community. She began her work as an equity and diversity facilitator 7 years ago at the University of British Columbia. And she's been invited to both keynote and speak at a variety of conferences, as well as present at Harvard. In 2020, she co-founded Humanize Consulting to do education outreach to raise funds for local grassroots organizations. She also runs workshops and training for companies on topics like anti-racism, gender and sexuality, and Indigenous awareness. She's especially passionate about raising awareness around disability and accessibility in both physical and online spaces. And her absolute favorite things are reading, chocolate peanut butter ice cream, one of my favorites, and her 6-pound Chewini Gary. So I'm going to stop, let Kale come on and say hello, do a little bit of an introduction of herself, and we're going to switch screen sharing. So welcome, Kale. Thanks again for joining us today and sharing your expertise so we can all learn about how we can make our website more accessible for our audience.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. All right, I'll just make sure my screen sharing is all good to go. Everyone can see that all right? Okay, perfect. All right, so I will just dive in. So on the screen is gray text over a yellow background, and it reads "Small changes, big impact, creating an accessible website for all" on the left. On the right is the Women's Enterprise logo. That's 3 colors. It's a sky blue, a red, and a purple, kind of chasing each other in a circle. Underneath is the Humanize Consulting logo, which is the words, and the H has 2 dots over the top of it. So in this presentation, I'm going to describe all the images. And if I don't, that means it's just a plain slide. We have a bright sun yellow color scheme with gray text on top of it. So as in the introduction was stated, I am a settler, and I acknowledge that I'm on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'd also would like to acknowledge, as we go through this training and talk about people with disabilities, that the physical impacts of disability and accessibility issues are really exacerbated for disabled Indigenous people. And I want to keep that in mind as we talk about disabilities. They remained resilient in their fight for disability justice against colonial oppression, but it's important to always keep them in mind when we're talking about these subjects. And welcome to everyone who's joining us from the lands all over the province and beyond, maybe. Okay, so on the next slide, this is me. The heading of the slide says who I am. On the left is a photo, it's a portrait of myself. I have long red hair, it's shaved on one side, kind of starting to grow it in thanks to COVID a little bit. I have tattoos on one arm, now on 2 arms, and I'm holding my glasses up, kind of peeking out from under them. On the other side is a photo of Gary. He's the wonder Chewini. Chewini is a Chihuahua dachshund kind of breed. He's my little dude. It's a close-up profile of him. He's wearing his Pride hoodie. It's got some rainbow trim on it. He's my emotional support buddy. You might hear him in the background. He's deep asleep right now. As soon as we wake up, he's awake for a little bit, and then he just passes right back out. So he's probably just going to be quiet, hopefully the whole time. And the photo on the bottom left is a photo credit to Adam Coble. He took this photo. He's at Elk and Moth on Twitter. He took a bunch of the portraits and all our photos on our website. So yeah, right now I'm standing in my living room. I'm wearing a sort of royal blue shirt, and I have my bookshelf behind me, my favorite part of my house, my floor to ceiling bookshelf. So yes, let's get started on this presentation. On this slide, there's a heading that says Eventbrite. Underneath is an illustration of a Black person with short, thick hair and prescription glasses sitting at an organized workstation. They're using a magnification app to navigate the web page. On the desk, there's a computer and a mouse and a large desk lamp and a small notebook. The slide reads, multiple dates, big changes, small impact, improving online accessibility by Humanize Consulting, 22 followers, a button that says follow. So I want to mention, first of all, that this illustration here and a lot of the other photos I use in this presentation is from a really amazing group called Disabled and Here. So for those of you that use photos ever in online and like on your website or social media, if you're looking for Creative Commons photos that you can use like without a license, just using an attribution license, which means that you can share them for free if you give credit. Disabled and Here are really great because they have disabled folks of like a wide range of people. They just added a bunch of illustrations, which are really beautiful. And I think we're going to share in the chat a link to how to find those photos. So yeah, I hope they get more. You can always donate to them to help them do that. But yeah, it's a really great source of photos, and I'll be using them throughout this workshop because representation matters. And yeah, so this presentation that I'm doing today is a shorter version of a longer workshop that I run. I was really excited to work with the Women's Enterprise Center when they asked me about running this workshop. This workshop I run is usually 2 hours, and I just go for the full time. It's really, really packed. So I do skip quite a bit of important information in this shorter version, although we're still going to cover a lot of really good sort of key things today. But if you'd like to take the full workshop, I am running it twice in September. I'm kind of running like a daytime one and then an early evening one to make it easy for everyone to come. One's going to be on Wednesday, September 8th in the afternoon from 1 to 3 PST. And the second will be Tuesday, September 14th from 5:30 to 7:30. So I think we have that link in the chat too, and that can get sent out. So, and that I know that we're sending out, the recording and everything else. So make sure that gets sent. So that webinar I'm running has quite a bit more information in it, because I said it's 2 pretty dense hours. There's a lot, and even then I'm kind of covering the surface, but it's got a lot of good basics in there. Okay, on this slide, this is a slide that has the logo of Creating Accessible Neighborhoods, which is CAN, the shortened version, www.canbc.org. The logo is orange and shows 4 heads, 2 at the top, 1 nestled between those 2 and 1 at the bottom, and they all have their outstretched arms encircling each other. I wanted to mention Creating Accessible Neighborhoods. They're an awesome nonprofit that empowers people with disabilities and or chronic health conditions. I usually donate some of the money from this webinar when I run it and people pay to come to it. I donate some of the money to CAN. CAN educates people about disabilities and ableism, social justice issues, and they really enable people to advocate for themselves and others while building community. They do an incredible job. Heather McCain is the executive director, and they have provided me with so much support and education and really just a ton of emotional labor. I highly recommend checking out their website. Heather also runs a bi-monthly peer-supported, facilitates a peer-supported monthly group for 2S LGBTQIA+ people with chronic health conditions, disabilities, called Chronically Queer. That group is an incredible group. It's twice a month. It used to be once in Burnaby and once in Vancouver, but now it's twice a month online since COVID started. That support group has been a really integral part of my own journey as a disabled and queer human, and learning acceptance and pride. And if that's a group that resonates with you, we also have the link for that group. So that being said, here is the overview of what we're going to go over in our brief time together. So what does accessibility mean? And some vocabulary. And vocabulary is very important. We'll all get on the same page here. Why accessibility matters, and then a little peek at how people with disabilities access the internet. On the slide is a quote. It says, accessibility refers to the design of products, devices, services, or environments for people who experience disabilities. And this is from accessibilitycanada.ca. This is a broad definition of accessibility from Accessibility Services Canada. Accessibility means a lot of things in a lot of different contexts, but in this webinar specifically, I'm going to be talking about your website and your online content being both available to and functionally operable. Very important to anyone. So the thing, it's going to help people with disabilities, but also those things often end up helping other people also. On this slide, there's an image of an Asian disabled woman. She's typing on a laptop while wearing compression gloves, and the hands and the keyboard are the focal point of the image. When we think about accessibility, we usually think about disability. It's important to think about this as disabled people are not often considered in online spaces. So there's a growing awareness. I think obviously we all understand that physical spaces, they should have things like ramps and elevators and accessible washrooms, although really these are just the tip of the iceberg. And there's so many instances I can think of where an event just writes, we're an accessible event. And then disabled people get there and it's not accessible at all because they think, so, there's an awareness around physical spaces needing to be accessible, and that's starting to happen. But I see that conversation rarely happening online and online spaces needing to be accessible. And the thing is that disabled people access the internet and do the same things that non-disabled people do. They connect, they communicate, they seek out services, and they go shopping and they buy things. And on top of that, online access and social media is a bridge for people with disabilities. They can share their voices, they build community, and they tackle isolation, which is huge for people with disabilities, not just during COVID, surprise, it's very important all the time, I think in the last year. And I've said this the whole time during COVID, it's been a glimpse into what people with disabilities live like all the time. It helps them find information about their disabilities and yes, even diagnose. I know we're all discouraged from looking at medical information online, but actually a lot of people end up finding a lot of information when they're sick for a very long period of time that way. And that's how they find their support networks, is online. So that's where a lot of disabled folks spend a lot of their time. And yet many websites and social media spaces totally exclude disabled people. I'm sure in your personal experience, you have been on websites, right? Where you go on them and they're frustrating to be on. They don't look good, they're uncomfortable, they don't work for you. And if that website doesn't work for you, you jump off it, right? And if a huge portion of the internet were unavailable for you because people didn't consider your needs when making it, imagine that, and imagine how connected to the world you are through the internet, and then even exponentially for people with disabilities. So, I spend a lot more time at home due to my disability, and so it makes it like imperative that online spaces are considered for people with disabilities. So that is why accessibility online is important. I'm going to do a quick poll here because I'm super curious, and the poll is: have you heard of Bill C-18? So this is the Accessible Canada Act. We're going to do a poll here. And yes, you've heard of it. You know what we're talking about? No idea. Or like, yeah, maybe I've heard of this. Possibly it's ringing a bell, but not totally sure. Leave that up there for a few minutes for people to. And then I actually don't know how to see the answer, so I'm going to need help from the awesome helpers here. Oh, here we go. Oh, 29% have heard of it. Okay. And 33% have possibly heard of it. That's actually better than I thought it would be. And 38% have not heard of it. So I think that's pretty interesting. That is more than I thought of that would heard of it. So cool. Okay, so yes, I'm curious. If anyone wants to type in the chat if they answered yes, like what maybe they'd heard about it. I'm kind of curious. You don't have to, but if you have said yes and so you know about it, like maybe what about it do you know? I'm kind of curious to know what you know. And I'm going to talk about it while you do that. So web accessibility laws in Canada. So the government of Canada has the standard on web accessibility, and BC18 is the Web Accessible Canada Act. So you might or may not know, as we saw, a lot of people do know, that we have web accessibility laws in Canada. So, the Canadian Human Rights Act of 1977 was created before we have the internet. So obviously that didn't cover anything online, but since then, interpretations were made on top of that. And it was determined that websites are required to make sure that organizations provide accessible content for persons with disabilities. And this includes employment listings and other website content. But they figured, we need to update this. So Bill C-18, also known as Accessible Canada Act, was passed in 2019. So really not that long ago, considering how long we've had the internet for. And I will read the quote here. In order to enhance the full and equal participation of all persons, especially persons with disabilities, in society. So basically it mandates compliance for digital content and tech for Parliament, the Government of Canada, and federally regulated organizations in the private sector. So I wonder, maybe people that have heard of it, might work in that sector more. And that means that only though government agencies, businesses, and orgs are required to provide equal access to all users with people with disabilities. It's in the federal public sector, the crown corporations, and all federally regulated organizations. So that means that if you run your own business, you don't necessarily fall under this. You don't necessarily legally have to comply with these rules. However, something I go into this more in detail in my webinar, but things are happening in the US right now where accessibility laws are starting to apply to, and going to start, I think, more applying to companies, just regular public companies. So I think that this could be on the horizon for Canada. I honestly hope it is. I think that's, you know, sometimes what you have to do to affect change. And so, yeah, get ahead of the curve on this one. Good idea. Okay. This slide is gray. It's got two sort of different gray backgrounds. And the quote says, it's a quote from Sir Timothy John Berners-Lee, who is called the inventor of the internet. So it says, the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So even the inventor of the internet was like, yes, we need everyone to be able to access the internet. That's kind of right, the point of it. So, you know, as a disabled human myself, I'm a champion of making both physical and online spaces accessible. I think this is a very powerful quote from a person who opened the world of online and the internet to all of us, right? So we're going to get into vocabulary next. But first, you know, there are many reasons to do these changes, but I briefly just want to discuss just few reasons of why we might want to make some of these changes, aside from the moral imperative. Okay, so on the left is a photo of a laptop on someone's lap and a black prosthetic arm holding a credit card. On the right is a laptop with a mini sort of marquee card next to it that reads Black Friday sale. So first of all, many disabled folks have money to spend, and you know, they could be spending it on your website. And people have ideas that people with disabilities don't have money, but disabled people worldwide have an annual disposable income of $8 trillion, which makes them the third largest economic power after the US and China. And so they have a lot of money. And like I talked about before, you know, you've been on a frustrating website, and if you don't want to be there, you jump off right away. Same thing. If 70% of disabled folks, if they're on a website and it's difficult to use, they'll just get off it immediately. And 90% of them won't bother telling you, hey, your website was inaccessible. They're not going to go like, hey, could you make your website more accessible for me? I really want to go spend money on your products. They're just going to leave. So you have to make those changes preemptively to make them, you know, make it able for them to be on there. The vast majority of them will, 80%, will spend money where they face the fewest barriers, not where the product is cheapest. So if they find a website that is accessible to them, even if there are other ones that are more difficult to use, but the product's cheaper, they're going to spend money on the website where the items are more expensive, even because just of ease. Of course, we all think of how frustrating it can be, you know, to be on the wrong place. So that's a really big opportunity for people that might not be on your radar of making things easier. So we're going to go through some vocabulary, because I think vocabulary is super important to get everyone on the same page. This section covers vocabulary and some terminology, and we're also going to learn about some technology of how people might be accessing your online content. And I don't go through all the technology. There is some other really cool stuff I share in my full webinar, but this is some cool things in here. So before we get started, I think it's important to define disability. It is an umbrella term for a condition that affects a person's senses, their brain, and or their body. And it's something that restricts a person's ability to go about their daily activities. More than that, though, it's an identity and a source of pride. So as you saw in the beginning, I said identify as disabled. It personally took me quite a long time after actually becoming disabled to identify as disabled, you know, and find that community. It really helped to find chronically queer, as I mentioned in the beginning. While the community faces marginalization, you know, the disabled community, and forms of oppression and ableism, which we're going to cover ableism next, the community is very resilient and resourceful. And then under the term disability, there are many ways that people self-identify within the disabled community. There's chronically ill, big D, little d, deaf, mad, and crip, and all kinds of identities within that community. And disability is kind of an umbrella term. On the next slide, we have ableism. So ableism is the discrimination of and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. So there's a lot wrapped up in that around the assumption that people with disabilities need to be fixed, that they deserve pity, that their disability is what defines them. That's pretty common, right? Like if you see someone in a wheelchair, that's the first thing you see and the first thing you think about them. It tells people that their worth is based on how they look, how they behave, how much they produce, capitalism, how much money we make, how much we're working. We're worth less if we're not working as much, because ableist ideas, you know, they stem from racism, anti-Blackness, capitalism, the medical industrial complex, the patriarchy, all these things together are producing ableist ideas in our society. And I wanted to include this because I think that the lack of consideration for disabled people's needs in online spaces is indicative of ableism throughout our society. And it exists everywhere, but it is rampant online. And I even see it in disabled online spaces, like it's everywhere and it needs to be addressed. So I'm very grateful to be doing this webinar and that you're all here. I'm so happy so many people registered and that so many people are here and gonna watch this recording. That feels really good that people are starting to be more aware of this. So yes, thank you for being here and listening. Able-bodied / temporarily able-bodied, or TAB. Able-bodied, this is a term used to describe someone who does not identify as having a disability. I prefer the term non-disabled. The term able-bodied could imply that all people with disabilities are able bodies. So this sort of ignores or perpetuates the idea that disabilities only affect people's bodies, right? Actually, one of the more common disabilities is mental health disabilities, right? And so that's not necessarily like when you think of like a body. And also the term non-disabled centers disabled people in the conversation. So I personally don't like the term able-bodied as much. I don't use that term. I prefer non-disabled. And then temporarily able-bodied is a term that the disabled community came up with because we want to acknowledge that pretty much every single person is just temporarily able-bodied or temporarily non-disabled. Because you could get injured at any time, and most people are at some point injured. You know, you can break a leg, you can get injured temporarily, but then you will be temporarily disabled, or aging, because we're all going to age and become disabled as we get older. It's going to impact, your daily life and your activities on a daily basis. And so, draw attention to the fact that ability is fleeting, and we're kind of at some point we'll all be in this together. So, as with all language, there are people that like some terms over other terms, and in every webinar and presentation I give, I like to talk about the fact that the terms don't really get to the issue of understanding the complexity of all of this, but it's important to sort of have some language to just start to understand things. Assistive technology. This is an umbrella term that includes assistive, adaptive, and rehabilitative devices for people with disabilities. Assistive technology is great. It helps with independence. It helps enabling people to perform tasks that maybe before they could not do at all, or it was really difficult for them to do without them. It can change how people interact with the world, and how people interact with technology. It assists people interacting with technology itself. So I have a few examples here we're going to go through. This one is a screen reader. So screen readers are really cool. They are a software program that uses a braille display or text, or it reads text out loud. So they are used to verbalize or speak, in quotes, everything on the screen, including text, graphics, control buttons, and menus, and then they use a computerized voice that reads that aloud. So in essence, a screen reader transforms the graphic user interface, the GUI, into an audio interface. And screen readers are essential for people who are blind or low vision. And I thought it might be helpful to watch a small video. It's about, I think, a 2 or 3 minute video on what it's like for someone to use a screen reader. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I think this is super cool. There we go.
I'm a JAWS screen reader user, and I basically use JAWS to do all my computer functions. But a big component of that is my using the internet and using email and so on for my home use and for work. My web page use, of course, is very important to me. It's how I access all the information at my fingertips. being vision impaired, it's sometimes difficult to get access to information. So the internet is my method for being able to do that. When a web page loads for me, JAWS actually starts reading the web page contents as it's loading. I miss that, listening to some of that sometimes. So what I normally do is I will actually move to the very top of the web page. And then I'll have JAWS start reading from the very top of the web page to me, so I can find out what is on the web page if it's a web page that I've not been on before. I'll just stop that there for the moment, but you might have noticed JAWS is speaking rather quickly, and for people who aren't used to the voice of JAWS, they actually can't understand what JAWS is saying. So, but just JAWS was reading the contents of that web page, but was also announcing each link to me, each heading and so on. So I can get an idea of how the web page is made up, and it also will give me a means of knowing how to navigate this page and what links I can access to move to relevant parts within the website. So, I mean, I just was getting JAWS to read out continuously, but I can do things like read character by character, word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, just up and down arrow if I choose to, and many JAWS users have different methods as to how they capture and listen to the information that's on web pages. So, Vision Australia on the Today Show. So I just find it amazing, and this has just opened a whole new world for me as a person that loves to use a computer, but without having the screen reader JAWS to use, I wouldn't be able to access the information that the computer provides, and to be able to use it to do what I need to do in my day-to-day living. So,
yeah, there we go. I love her.
I'm a JAWS screen reader user.
Next one, there we go. I love how she's like, some of you may have noticed it goes kind of fast. Oh, just a little fast. All right. Person first versus identity first language. So person first language puts the person before the disability and uses phrases like person with a disability. So, or person with autism instead of disabled person or autistic person. So this is, I think, generally more institutional language, and it advocates like it because it focuses on the person rather than the condition. So you're hearing about the person first and then the disability. Identity first language, on the other hand, is used, to me, in the disabled community much more. You see, I use it. I say I'm disabled. I'm a disabled person. That's the language I'm using more in this presentation. It's preferred by the National Federation for the Blind, and most autistic people say I'm autistic rather than person with autism. It's sort of seen as person first language is kind of overly sensitive, and I kind of agree. There's a lot of different reasons, so it means saying a deaf person rather than person who's deaf. You're claiming the identity with pride. You're celebrating the fact. You're announcing that. It's used by, like I said, I think it's used by most communities rather than certain institutions and certain maybe specific groups might use person first language more. And that's fine. It's totally fine. As I say in all my presentations, use the language and follow the lead of the person you're speaking to. So if they identify as a person with a disability, then always refer to them as that, or vice versa, right? So just whatever term anyone gives in any situation, just use that term for them. I think that makes the most sense for them. You don't ever need to say to someone, actually, we don't say person with autism, we say autistic. They can call themselves whatever they want, and we just go with that. Okay, so before we move into the next section, I am curious, we're gonna do one more poll. And this poll is, have you integrated any accessibility features into your social media? So as of right now, whatever social media or the website you currently have you thought about, and not just thought about, but like actually done anything to make your website or your social media spaces more accessible? And again, we have like, yes, it's something I've thought about and I've done it. No, or like possibly, like I think I have, maybe I have, but I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to, something like that. Or no is totally fine. Like no is like, that's why I'm here, because I haven't done this, but I'm ready to learn. So no is a totally okay answer. No one needs to feel bad about it, saying no. I'll give everyone a few minutes to answer that one. As like I said, honestly, even in disabled spaces online, I see so many people not doing it. Oh, we are fairly split, 30 and 30 for yes and possibly, and then 39 no. So that's interesting, and that's awesome that 40% of people, haven't done it and they're here. So that's rad. So again, I'm just gonna say thank you so much for coming. I'm always excited when people are just ready to learn, and the people who have, that's awesome. Hopefully you are going to learn more things. All right, okay, web design. So some basic things, in the website. There's a lot more in my webinar. I go into like tools that you can use and software you can use and all kinds of different things, add-ons, but here I'm just going to cover just a few basic things. So the first one is color scheme. Okay, color choices. To me, this was, this is maybe one of the biggest decisions when you're starting a business, or maybe one of the most fun. Maybe you're branding or making decisions about a social media campaign. What is your website or your social media going to look and feel like? So high contrast colors for foregrounds and backgrounds will benefit users with low vision, and it will also help other people so they don't experience eye fatigue. So having high contrast colors are good. Primary, secondary, and accent colors can be selected to support usability. So sufficient color contrast between elements can help users with low vision see and use your app. So again, I go into this in more detail about like how you can check, like, are these colors contrasted enough? Which colors work well for people with low vision? There's actually like software and things you can use for free that tell you like these colors work together, these don't. I also go into color blindness, which affects around 8% of men. It's actually quite a lot that you should think about when designing your website, because there are situations where even buttons or how to purchase things might not be visible. And I go through a demo of all that and how that all works. But for now, just know like that is something important to consider if you're getting started or if you're designing something new, that contrast is really important. It's like a big thing when people come to your website and they're looking at it, right? How people view everything. So contrast ratios, color contrast is important for users to distinguish various text and non-text elements. But higher contrast, this feels like a tongue twister, sorry. Higher contrast makes the imagery easier to see, and lower contrast image may be hard for users to differentiate in bright light or low light conditions, like on a sunny day or at night. So, okay, I go into this a little bit. I have some image to show what I'm talking about here. So in this, we have two images. So on the left, there is text that reads, "The woodman set to work at once." The text is black and it's set against a white. There's black text set against a white, and white text set against a black. So there's two versions, bigger and smaller. And underneath it reads "do." So these icons follow color contrast ratio recommendations and are legible against their backgrounds. So color contrast, we're thinking about the contrast here between the words and what the background is. And you can see on the right, it's the same thing that we're looking at, but the text in this case and the background are both lighter, and you can see they're much harder to read. So this one says, "Caution, these icons don't follow the color contrast ratio recommendations and may be difficult to discern against their backgrounds." So the issue is that, these are these are dramatized to show you, right? Like this is pretty easy for you to look at and be like, yeah, I probably wouldn't do the one on the right because it's fairly obvious that that's not super legible, but it's that it's not as obvious to us always, right? So there are things that can help you discern these ratios for other people that have low vision that can be helpful. And here's another example, because it's not always going to be text, right? So in this same example, there's okay, so there is the black background with a gray heart and then a white background with a gray heart. And the other one is the same, but with the gray is lighter in both cases. And so the do's is these icons follow the color contrast ratio recommendations and are legible against their backgrounds. And on the other side, these icons don't follow the color contrast ratio recommendations and may be difficult to discern. So these are two examples. And oops, oh no, where did I go? I scrolled my mouse too far, sorry. There we go. Okay, so yes, so this is just, to let you know that color contrast is important and looking at it, and it's not always going to be this obvious, but it's important to consider these things when we're making. Okay, pop-ups. I'm just going to have a little discussion about pop-ups on our website, because maybe we all love pop-ups, right? Probably most of us use them. Maybe when someone visits our website for the first time, they have a pop-up saying sign up for our email list, or we offer them a deal, or offer them a deal on something. Here, you go to so many websites and there's pop-ups. And I'll admit, even as an educator on disability awareness, until I really dove into pop-ups, and let me tell you, I spent hours diving into pop-ups, because everything I have in this webinar, I've spent hours and hours and hours researching. I had one on my website. Now, I designed my original website for myself, and I'm not a designer. So making that pop-up took forever. It took me a long time to build that pop-up. So I was very proud of that pop-up. And I think I had some sunk cost fallacy happening when I made that website or made that pop-up. And it was very hard to let go of the pop-up when I learned that I should not have pop-ups. So I was very attached to it. But when I learned what I'm going to tell you, I did let it go. And it was hard, but I will give you my case now for why I think you should let go of pop-ups. And maybe you could at least think about it. So first of all, beyond the fact that many people hate pop-ups in general, and even the man who invented pop-ups, he says, quote, "They are the most hated tool in an advertiser's toolkit and has apologized for making them." So yes, first of all, that is the fact that people just hate them in general. And my designer that came in and redesigned my website for them, she is young, in her early 20s, and says, just no, you cannot have these. And that was from a designer point of view, not from a disability accessibility point of view. And I had to argue with her back and forth. And it wasn't until I really learned about the accessibility issue. And she just said, no, they're universally loathed. You cannot have these. And so, okay, but anyway, beyond that. So pop-ups are really awful for screen readers, which we went over, and for screen magnifiers, which I don't have a chance to cover in this presentation, but I do another one. If someone is using one of these tools and they come to your website, they will almost guaranteed leave immediately, because they're not accessible for almost any tool that is using to access the internet. So people with disabilities that use these tools say they pretty much think twice of going to any website that has a pop-up. So I read in an article, actually, that there's one woman who says she doesn't book on JetBlue, which I think is an American, or I'm not sure if it's an American, maybe a European, I'm not sure, but it's an airline company. And so she says she won't even book with them anymore, even though in many cases they're the cheapest flights. And we all know, right? We all search for like the cheapest flights. That's a big price difference. You want to find the cheapest flights, right? But their pop-ups are too hard to navigate. They basically just totally mess with the reading system. And so she says, no, I don't care about cheap flights anymore. It's just too much. So they just go to other websites and book with other places. So imagine if she's giving up cheap flights, what other people are giving up if they don't want to use pop-up, right? So what's the alternative to using pop-ups? That's part of the thing, right? Okay, well, if you're going to give up something, we need to use something else. Well, really just stop using them. And for myself, when I told my web designer, okay, that's it, we're not going to use pop-ups anymore, she sent me like a GIF of, super happy reaction. And I said, what are we going to do now? And she said, let's just have a button that's very obvious on the website, and it will say sign up for a newsletter. and people will sign up if they want to. And that's probably what they're going to do anyway. If someone isn't, as long as they know you have a newsletter, they're going to sign up if they want to and not if they don't. So now it is in your hands. If you have pop-ups and those are things you're interested in, you can make the decision to have them or not. But I have noticed them so much more now, and they are ubiquitous. They're everywhere on the internet. And I really feel for people who basically, are using technology to access the internet, and they get on somewhere and they, just cannot use that website anywhere. Okay, alternative text. This is the really meaty part of this presentation that I really want to go over. So this is something that is important across all your platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and your website. It is a tenet of good website design. Alternative text, or alt text, is also known as alt attributes or alt descriptions. It is a short written description of an image. Okay, so I showed you how screen readers work. Well, screen readers cannot describe an image. They don't have the ability to magically see an image and then tell the person using the screen reader what it is. You have to provide that info. So you write a description, and when the screen reader comes across it, it reads the description you provided out loud. Alt text is also used in place of an image when the image can't be loaded. So this is great for people who don't have good connectivity. And shockingly, there are people who don't live in Vancouver and have awesome connectivity. Like there are people in rural BC all the time, or wherever, who are trying to get on the internet, and their pages might not be loading quick, but if you write an alt text description, they'll be able to see what the image is, even if their internet isn't working amazing. So like I said, there are things that help for accessibility that will help everyone. So, or if the website is blocking an image for some reason, that can happen too, right? Maybe they have an ad blocker up, maybe they have different things that are blocking images. If you have alt text up there, it will help them be able to know what that image is supposed to be. It also helps because some people with cognitive disabilities might turn off images on their screen because the internet can just be overwhelming sometimes, but they still want to go on there. So alt text helps a lot of different people. Also, very, very big, it helps with SEO. Search engine optimization. It helps boost your ratings in Google rankings. This is huge. Every time you go in onto your website, especially obviously, and like put an alt text in the back end on your website, you add that, it will improve it because as the search engine crawlers in the back are looking to do Google rankings, they're looking for alt text. So there's the reason, reason to help all these different people that can help. And then there's the reason to boost your ratings in Google. So this is how you get higher rankings on Google. So alt text gives your user the most important information about an image. It's not about packing keywords. If you're thinking about SEO and you want to pack keywords in, that's not the purpose of this. It's about the person being able to get a pretty good idea of what an image is. So let's just talk about how to use alt text. You describe the image as specifically as possible. It's a description of images for users who can't see the image. So think about that when you're writing them. Make sure it conveys that. You keep it short and sweet. Think of it like a tweet. If you use Twitter, it's like a tweet. Most popular screen readers won't stop reading around 125 characters or 30 words. So you have to keep it super, super short. If you're writing it, the space you're writing it might give you a lot more space to write it in, but screen readers aren't gonna include it and it won't show up in all places. So you have to use keywords. Alt text provides you an opportunity to target keywords on your page. And so it is an opportunity in some ways to use target keywords, but your first priority should be describing the context of the image. If it makes sense to do so, you can use a keyword in the alt text, but that's not the priority of them. If you start packing them, the crawlers will know that, okay? Google won't dock you points for a poorly written alt text, but you'll be in trouble if you just stuff keywords in there. Okay, so if you just try to pack them in there, Google will know that. But they don't know if you're not writing like a beautiful, like the most perfect alt text, but they will know if you're just abusing it to try to like write keywords in there and mess with your search engine optimization. You don't have to waste space writing, this is an image of, or this is a photo of. Alt text does that for you. That's the purpose. Don't use images as text. I mean, that's you don't put an image to show what an image is. Use plain language and use spell check. Don't use stuffy language. Don't say utilize when you mean use. Spelling is important. Punctuation, periods, commas are important because that's how screen readers read. But it does not have to be formal. And it's actually, think of it as like a chance to connect, with your customers. Because it is a way that you're connecting with customers. So when you should use alt text, always links, buttons, icons, logos Don't just say company logos. See how I described mine? I said the H had 2 dots on top of it. Banners, photos. You can leave the alt text out. If the image is purely decorative, then it's not necessary. So you're using it if there's a purpose to that image. Don't neglect form buttons. If a form button on your website says submit, give it an alt attribute. Image buttons should have an alt attribute that describes something like search or apply now. Like the button is just a photo. So you need something that tells people what that photo is. Yeah, that's important. Okay, social media. We're just going to explain a little thing. The web basics though. Be consistent in your design. Use responsive design. Fonts, buttons, icons, again, remember those to add alt text for those. Use headings, because as you saw how that screen reader read, they can skip from heading to heading to heading. They don't want to read every single thing. And use simple language. Okay, and social media, again, this is just a very brief social media. I dive into this quite a bit more, but I'm going to do my number 1 tip, also my number 1 pet peeve, okay, of the easiest thing to do and the best thing to do. So easy. If you do one thing, if alt text seems like a lot of work, this is one thing you can do from this webinar. Hashtags, okay? This is super simple. Capitalize the first letter of each word in your hashtag. So on the left, it says do, and it's hashtag, and each word is capitalized. Do, make them legible. Do, capitalize each word. Do, see how easy this is? Okay, and the don't. And then this one is how most hashtags are all written. All small letters, no capitalization. Hashtag, make them run on. Hashtag, forget to capitalize all at all. Hashtag, this is a jumble to read. Because screen readers, if you capitalize each word, will read them as separate words. And if you don't, it will go blah, 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 and the person reading them cannot read them at all. And again, I see these on disabled Instagram, disability-led Instagrams all the time. And I'm like, no, don't. It's so easy. It's so easy. So you can see, right, even for you to read it, like, let alone screen readers, I assume that you're looking at this, you can see what's easier to read, right? It's easier for people with dyslexia, cognitive abilities. It's easier for people who might not speak English as a first language. Like, it's easier for like younger people if they're using the internet. It's just something that helps, you know, people, again, with literacy. It just helps so many more people than people with screen readers. As everything, when you're doing something with disability, if you help disabled folks, you're going to help everyone else. Win, win, win. So this is just an example. When I searched on Twitter, the word disability, it was like a drop-down menu of when I looked, and there's like, you can see some of them. Like, there's a hashtag disability filibusters capitalized, hashtag disability crowdfund, and hashtag disability wish list is all capitalized. So this is just pointing out that, like, if you use automatic hashtags, they are not going to, like, if you let them fill themselves in, they're not, then this is the disability one. Most of them are not capitalized. You need to, like, get your hashtags. I'm sure, you know, if you're copy and pasting them, have them already capitalized so you can copy and paste them. And if you're going to let them autofill, you're going to have to go in and change them themselves. So we only have 5 minutes left for Q&A. I'm very sorry. But that's because there's so much to say, and you should definitely come to my other webinar. Yes. Okay. And that's it. Thank you. Yes, I would say that is that. There we go. I hope there's not 1,000 questions. And if I can, I will answer them in 6 minutes. I have a feedback form that we can post. This is a feedback form for me specifically, not from WEC, that I really appreciate. It's very short, just filling out for my own purposes for running this webinar. And also feel free to email me any questions you have. I have the email in there. You don't need to, if filling out the survey is not accessible. This is another thing. If you're ever sending out surveys, also provide your email. Sometimes survey forms are not accessible and emails can be more accessible. So that is all. And yes, should we do some questions in 5 minutes?
We can. So I have a question here that came up. So you showed the video of JAWS reading the web content. What are some of the key things when, like you said, the hashtags, you put the capital letters to break up that text? What are some of the tips to quickly make sure that the website is going to be read out loud to somebody in the manner that you want? Right.
I think I said it super quickly, and but So like I said, so she can skip from heading to heading. So it has to do with design and how you're designing your website. So if you know in the background of your website, right, there's like H1, H2, H3 when you're making headings, doing that correctly is really important. And then making sure that that's consistent through your website, that's a big one, so that they can skip, if they read a heading and then they can skip to the next heading, the next heading, the next heading, that's actually super important. I would say that's the main one. There's a few other ones. But that's the first big one. Yeah, that's the key, so that they can skip through all the website quickly to find the section they want to find. Yeah, we'll go with that one. We'll go with that quick one for now. Yeah,
that's a good start. Yep.
Yeah.
And then on that alt text for the image, what is the recommended either characters or number of words for ease of use, but also, manageability for SEO and all those things? So you said it, I think, there quickly too, but
yeah,
how many words, characters should we be considering for that?
Yeah, 125 characters or 30 words. Okay. And so it's kind of a skill, and you can Google best alt text, and you can like find examples, and in my longer webinar, I show like how to put it on your website, how to put it in like Instagram and all kinds of different places like that, and go over some examples. But it's you'll get used to it. At first it will feel a little weird and awkward, like doing anything new, but you get used to it pretty quick, because you have to get creative. Just like when we all started using Twitter and we're like, what? But then you kind of get used to that small space. Yeah.
But it's also good to consider that, like you said, not just keyword stuffing, because that's not going to read properly or describe the image to anyone.
Yeah, it'll and like I said, like the search engine crawlers for Google are looking for that, because some people would go in and just be like, store, clothes, and they're just like, no, they're looking for that. So you can use one, like if that's what it is, if you're showing, a woman wearing a shirt and a model in your shop, and so you're like, redhead woman wearing blue shirt, and that's your keyword, right? That's okay. And it's doing its job. So that's good. That's a good idea to write that, because that's probably what your image is, right? It's probably an image that's relevant, and it might have your keyword in it. But if it doesn't have your keyword in it, that's okay, and you should still do it either way. Okay.
And what about
just having the alt text will be beneficial, even if it doesn't have any keywords in it. It is beneficial for SEO either way. Yeah.
And what about if your website is an online store and all of the images are your products, which then also have the description of the product? You don't want to be, I would assume, too repetitive there. So what's a recommendation on that? Let's say it's a face cream as an example, and you've got that, this is the cream and here's the description. What should you use for the image?
So this is interesting. So I didn't get a chance to go into this here, but there are image descriptions which are visible, and then alt text is in the background. Like if I add an alt text, you can't see that. So you actually do need an alt text for every image, even if you have an image description, because alt text is behind the scenes and you don't see it at all. So every single image, even if you have an image description, should have an alt text. Yeah. And it can be repetitive over and over and over and over again, because then they're still knowing what that image is. Because imagine you're on a screen and it just says image, image, image. You can't tell that image is the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Okay. Good. And then another question is coming up here. The JAWS program, is that something that works on any operating system, like whether you're on Mac or PC?
I think so. I don't know a ton about, I know there are several different, there's more than several. You could tell, I think, from that video that it's a few years old, right? Like from the web browser she was using. It's just a good video. That's why I like that video. Like, it's a nice one. But I know there are newer technologies, and also like technologies within phones themselves that are starting to do things like that. So, but I'm pretty sure that JAWS can be used on Mac or, I'm not 100% sure though. Yeah, I will find that out though. Now I'm curious.
Yeah. And then what do you recommend for a screen reader? So if we are setting up our website or doing an audit of our website to say, hey, is this accessible? What's a good tool for us to do that self-evaluation so that we can see how our website actually reads? What's a tool that you would recommend for that?
Oh, for screen readers. Right. I don't have, let me think.
And you can send that to us. We have the follow-up
Yeah.
email. So maybe,
Yeah.
you can send us maybe an option there. And then again, a tool to check the contrast ratios, color scheme.
Yeah, a lot of those I go over in my longer webinar. I have like, there's sort of different add-ons, and then I have a long resource list. The screen reader is an interesting one because I'm trying to think, like I have like best practices of how to do it, but I don't know without like buying screen reader software, you can't exactly like go through your web and like, there are tools to check the contrast and all that kind of stuff. Other than like hiring someone to do because you can hire people to do accessibility audits of your website.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
But yeah, you can do that option if you want to do that. But there are definitely like a list of best practices for screen readers. Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Well, I want to be mindful that we do, we're at our time, which is great. There was lots of chat in here, questions. So again, if anything comes up for anybody after today's session, you can fire that off to Netta as well, and we'll pull together some resources in the follow-up email. Quickly, again, we've got a couple of webinars coming up that you might be interested in. So we have the HR series coming up. So if you've got employees, if you're going to be bringing on employees, if you're struggling like a lot of businesses right now to keep your employees, this is a great series for you. We have another WECafe coming up, The Power of Purpose, how to elevate your business by uncovering your social purpose. And we have scheduled a webinar with the Government of Canada, so how to bid on contracts, but we're just waiting to confirm with the election that's been called, if we can, continue to promote that, or if we've got to pause it. So we'll stand by on that one as well. And again, we're here to support you. You're not in business by yourself. There's lots of resources, tools, things that we can provide to you on a regular basis. And in the follow-up email, we will share some of that, links to the recording, some additional resources, etc. from Kale. So again, thank you so much, Kale. That was a lot of information in an hour, but lots to think about, and lots that we might not be aware of, right? Making assumptions that, our website is in good state or our social media is in good state. So lots of tips and advice. So thank you very much to Kale. Thank you for Netta in the background, sharing everything in the chat and keeping our polls up and running. And here's the last one. Again, Kale shared her brief survey, and then we have ours as well for you to complete this poll. And then we'll have a link to our full survey, and every quarter somebody can win a $50 Visa gift card. So we'd love to get your feedback and ideas for future sessions. So again, thank you, Kale. Thank you everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.